Hi everyone, Dominator here, and today we need to talk about the loot in Anthem's endgame. Let's get started.
I've been so alone ever since I left the tribe. That's just how it goes. Guess I like the...
Now, when you look at the current feedback we are seeing about Anthem's endgame, a lot of people are complaining about the lack of loot or meaningful loot in the game. You will check on the Reddit forums, you will see on just different, like on Twitter, and different content creators are saying that we should be fire hosed, literally just fire hosed with the loot all across the board in this game. And I believe that is a band-aid to a larger issue and a larger problem. Now, the three main problems I currently see with the loot system in endgame is: one, the difficulty / time to reward ratio is off. Two, there are too many low value or non-existent value random roll inscriptions on loot that do not create value overall for that particular piece of gear. And three, we as freelancers do not have a way to get loot directly in the game and farm a particular piece of weapon or gear at the moment. Everything is completely RNG, which is an important aspect of a looter shooter. However, players also need to know and have a way to directly get the loot that they want by playing the game and grinding in the game. So let's talk about the first issue, which is the gear / time to reward ratio. At the moment in the end game, once you hit level 30, you have access to Grandmaster 1, 2, and 3 difficulties. As you go up the difficulty levels, the game tells you that there's a significant increase in the drop rates of Masterworks and Legendaries as you go in higher difficulties. One of the best ways to get these higher end game tier loot, as you can see here, these are all Masterworks on my screen on the right there. One of the best ways to do this is to run strongholds. And at the moment, certain strongholds are way more time efficient than others. Let me explain. Currently at GM1, the entry level end game difficulty, once you hit level 30, Grandmaster 1 difficulty Tyrant Mine, will take about 20 to 25 minutes to complete at Grandmaster 1, and you are guaranteed one masterwork at the end of that particular stronghold. Now, comparing that to when I played the other night, the Heart of Rage stronghold, the end boss alone, the Monitor, took us over 30 minutes to kill alone. So it took us 15 minutes just to get to the Monitor, plus another 30 to 40 minutes just to kill the guy because his health pool was just massive. And by the way, you're only guaranteed one masterwork at GM1 at the end of that stronghold. Do you see the problem here? Why are players incentivized to do at all the Heart of Rage when it takes up to 45 minutes for a okay group to complete and get the same guaranteed amount of gear when they could do the same thing at the strong GM1 Tyrant Mine stronghold? They can almost run 2 of those in the time it takes to complete one Heart of Rage. In that time you complete 2 Tyrant Mine strongholds, you have guaranteed 2 masterworks. Here's the problem with the whole, and here's the argument that people are presenting, that we should be showered in loot. The problem specifically when we're talking about the gear to time ratio is you should get more loot as things become more difficult because it takes more time, or potentially takes more time, and it is more difficult, therefore it should be more rewarding. However, at the first Grandmaster difficulty at the end game, at the moment you are guaranteed one masterwork per completion of a stronghold. I'm okay with this at the moment because you're at the first difficulty level of endgame. Now, as you go on to GM2 and 3, I think that guaranteed loot from a masterwork needs to be higher. At GM2 or 3, you need to get like 2, 3, 4, and maybe in that range, guaranteed masterworks. And if you complete a stronghold at GM3, the hardest difficulty in the game, I believe that's the point where we should be showered in loot. And the whole pursuit of us making our javelin stronger and becoming better needs to be slow and steady. And at the end, once you're at the GM3 level and you're doing that type of activity, you're going to be definitely trying to min-max your gear. And by that time, you're going to be wanting to get a lot more loot because you're trying to get that one extra 1-2% on a particular piece or a particular like LMG damage or gear damage or elemental damage, whatever particular stat you're looking for. The logic behind showering us a loot at GM1 does not make sense because it takes less effort and it's not as difficult at that particular difficulty. And that is the issue we're having right now, where it almost does not make sense to do higher difficulty like GM2 and GM3 because the current drop rates and the guaranteed drop rates are not equivalent or proportional, my mistake, proportional to the reward you are getting for doing that particular difficulty. I believe BioWare needs to look at that, because if you want players to do the hardest difficulty, you know, in your game, people need to feel rewarded for doing that. And at the moment, the reward, it makes zero sense to go do harder difficulty, or even at the same difficulty level, it does not make sense to do a particular endgame activity. Example, Heart of Rage, because it takes longer. So in that particular stronghold, they need to either lower the monitor's health or make it more rewarding to do that particular stronghold. Hey, actually at GM1, do Tyrant Mind, you get 1 guaranteed. But you do the Heart of Rage stronghold, you actually might get 2, maybe 3 guaranteed, because it takes longer, because it's more difficult. It just intrinsically is, because the monitor has more health than the spider at the end of the Tyrant Mind. So we just talked about the gear difficulty time ratio that is off. Now let's talk about, in particular, the loot getting random stats and those stats not being that meaningful. I have an example here of the chaotic rhyme. In this, anytime you get a piece of loot, it's going to have random stats rolled on each of those items. On my chaotic rhyme at the moment, which is a pretty good, you know, after freezing an enemy, increases my other ability, my other seal by 125% for 20 seconds. That's quite a long time. However, this is a frost damage seal. If you see the first perk down here, it gives me increase electric effect by 10%. It gives me shotgun 15% ammo, marksman rifle 13%, and marksman rifle ammo 19% ammo. These two are pretty synergistic, but and then a random shotgun, it just doesn't make sense overall as a whole. Why would I want electric effect on an ice or frost seal? That makes zero sense whatsoever. And what I want to advocate for, instead of getting us showered in loot, let's make sure loot has more valuable perks added to them. Why is electric effect even in the RNG random roll inscription like pool on a frost item? That doesn't make sense at all. This particular piece of gear is on me at the moment because it's one of the better ones and it synergizes well with another piece of gear. But overall, this is a really, really bad chromatics rhyme. It just is. It has no synergy whatsoever within its own inscriptions. You have marksman rifle, shotgun. I don't run any of those particular weapons. So I want to advocate for more of a system where, okay, if it's an frost seal, this needs to be frost damage. And maybe it's a range of 7% to 15%, whatever it may be. But if we keep it at frost, if I get a 7% one and then my next chaotic rhyme maybe has 9 or 10, that already has more value to me, the player, and makes me want to, you know, grind more for this particular seal. I know I'm going to get that 1, 2, 3 extra percent on the next drop. Rather than, okay, well, if I get another chaotic rhyme, it can just have completely random and just completely useless rolls on it. And I think that's the major issue people have right now. A lot of these different weapons and seals and components just have the most randomest. And I get it's a looter shooter and there needs to be RNG and there needs to be some form of randomness, but it just seems too random. Again, my Ponder Infinity is pretty crappy. Here's why. It's a electric ability with fire damage, sniper ammo. The elemental damage is pretty good. It's pretty synergistic because this is an elemental seal, and auto rifle damage. In my mind, let's make loot a little bit smarter. If this is an electric effect, this needs to be electric down here. This elemental is nice, but let's keep things within itself. Let's keep it elemental. Let's keep it within seals. Let's increase seal or recharge rate or something to do with the seal itself rather than random rolls on a sniper and an auto rifle. By smarter loot, let's still have random rolls. We can still have random percentages here. That will make loot more valuable, but there's too much randomness because this could have been a gear. This could have been a gear, not a whole javelin salute. Like for this one, there's 9% fire damage on a frost seal. How does that make sense? And I get the argument that, okay, this can synergize well with other things. But the second I get an ice storm with frost, it's over. Like, I don't want fire at all. I have no fire abilities at all in my particular build. Again, gear damage, ammo, harvest bonus, sniper. It's just all over the place and it's too random. Now, again, RNG is important in a looter shooter, but there needs to be some sort of value, intrinsic value within the gear that you are putting on your javelin. This one in particular, I'm a little iffy on because it's a legendary. It's one of the highest pieces of gear in the game, or like value geared. 225 damage, physical damage. Holy cow. 15%. Like, so this particular gear means it's getting 225 physical damage to this particular piece of gear. Although, if I'm reading this correctly, this is an elemental damage seal. And on it, I have 225 physical damage. This little gear means it's for this thing only. This little javelin means it's across the board, across my entire javelin. How does this make sense? It's a elemental damage seal, but I have 225% physical damage increase to this particular item. If I'm to understand this correctly, I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments. That is an issue. If you made this elemental damage, this would instantly increase the value of this particular legendary by a massive amount. However, this legendary is now garbage and useless to me because of that one stat, the biggest and largest stat on this particular piece of gear. And legendaries are hard to come by. You don't get a lot of them. So I'm advocating to fix this problem. Have smart loot. Yes, keep RNG within the loot, but certain abilities like physical damage on an elemental damage piece of gear should not be rolled on these pieces of gear. It just shouldn't. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. So we just talked about smarter loot and making sure that the particular seals or particular weapons have the synergy within themselves within that piece of loot. And we shouldn't just have random rolls across the entire board. There needs to be some sort of, sanity here. The third and final thing or criticism I've been seeing of the loot system, and I wanted to bring up, is players right now do not have a way to get a particular piece of loot from a direct source. What I mean by that is everything in the game is RNG. Everything, absolutely everything. All the numbers, what loot pieces you get, what drops you get, what value level you get from drops. It's kind of all over the place. For example, I need my last masterwork component here, but there is no way and no system or mechanic in the game that will hey, you know what? This is the last masterwork piece I need. Let me go grind this particular farming area in the game, or let me go do 5 strongholds, and at the end of it, or this quest line, I can get a component, like a random rolled component. This is beneficial to the player because I could literally, because of RNG, go for like my entire gaming experience without getting another component because of RNG. Now, I don't believe that will ever happen because just the math is on my side. However, RNG can be a really cruel, mean person. It just can. It can really screw you over at times. But giving players a way to directly achieve certain goals with their gear will help bring more value to the end game. Players will feel more rewarded by like, hey, you know what? I know at the end of this particular quest line, I know at the end of this particular challenge, I will get X component. I will get this weapon that might have certain roles on it. I may get XYZ. Players need some sort of direction, especially in a game that is purely RNG across the board. In conclusion, Anthem has been a fun experience for me. There are particular items or particular mechanics in the game that need to be improved, and that is especially the case with the loot system. At the moment, the gear to difficulty and time ratio is not where it needs to be, and you need to be rewarded as a player proportionally for the time and difficulty of the game that you're playing. We also talked about how the loot system within the game needs to be smarter, and that there needs to be you should not be getting certain roles on certain pieces of gear. And finally, we talked about how there needs to be mechanics in the game that allow players to go directly and get the piece of gear that they may want. And it doesn't have to be every single, like there shouldn't be a quest for every single one. Okay, there's a quest for the component, a quest for seals, quest for weapons. That's not what I'm saying. Maybe it's cycling through. Maybe one week it's you can get these XYZ components, but you have to complete this achievement, or you have to go kill 100 of these Scar in this particular area on the map, and then you might get a chance at a component. Whatever it may be, all these different points are to help not prove. I'm not trying to prove anything here. I'm just trying to create an argument against just showering the player in loot, because you start giving players a fire hose of random rolled crappy loot that they do not want or need, and it provides zero value. It devalues the loot overall as a whole. I'm advocating for more a quality versus quantity improvements to the loot system overall. The band-aid is firing hose everything at us. The long-term solution is creating a loot system that has quality, that is rewarding, and that is fun. At the moment, it's fun to get certain pieces of gear, but it can definitely be an improved experience overall. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, subscribe, and let me know what you think about the loot system down in the comments below. This is Dominator, and I'll see you next time.